I think everyone's ready. We'll get started. Ryan's going to be leading our next presentation, which I'm really excited about, roundtable. Ryan's with Miller Nash, so I'll let him take it away.
Thanks, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Hall. I'm an attorney at Miller Nash. I primarily practice construction law, but also do a little bit of insurance coverage work. I'm here today to moderate a great panel with three impressive individuals, and we're going to talk about real-world examples of organizations, projects, and initiatives that have successfully embraced diversity and justice in the construction industry. And so, as an initial matter, just wanted to let everyone know that we intend this to be a pretty free-flowing discussion. So if at any point you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll come over with the mic. When you keep the dialogue going to the extent we can, so don't feel like you need to wait to the end to ask questions. So to introduce our panel, first we have Nick Baldwin-Sayre. He's an assistant county attorney with Multnomah County. Nick graduated from UCLA before attending law school at Lewis and Clark. After over a decade in private practice, Nick left to work for Multnomah County, and Nick represents the county in all construction matters and environmental compliance and permitting. Nick, do you want to expand a little bit more on your role with the county?
Sure. I'm one of a team, and one of the other guys is Andrew McKendrick, who's right there, who works on all the construction projects for Multnomah County. We regularly have over $1 billion in ongoing projects, and that number is about to get a lot bigger here in the very near future. I handle the end parts of those projects, which means litigation, but I do help advise on some contracts as well.
Thanks, Nick. And next we have George Carrillo. He is the CEO of the National Hispanic Construction Alliance. He's a former Marine and Sheriff's deputy and was previously a program manager at the Oregon Health Authority's Behavioral Health Services office. He ran for governor in 2022 and did pretty well before serving as executive director of the Latino Built Association, which is a trade association for Latino contractors. And he recently became the CEO of the National Hispanic Construction Alliance, which is an organization dedicated to advancing the interests of the Hispanic construction community across the U.S. George, would you like to expand on what it is that the National Hispanic Construction Alliance practices?
Sure. Well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to have one unified voice across the United States when it comes to interest in construction, all different levels. You know, we in this country are faced with a housing crisis, and we understand that can't be resolved unless we are leaning on the ingenuity of the Latino community, because we do represent about 47% of that labor force in the United States. And so we are taking this national approach to be able to provide not just the advocacy of policies that will actually help us build what we need to build, but also providing a level of education for developers, general contractors, subcontractors, and workers to understand what does it take to be successful in the construction industry. And so that is our primary focus and what we continue to push forward in order to be able to build the infrastructure that this country needs.
Thanks, George. And then lastly, we have Joe Calderon. He's the president and owner of Sterling Pacific Commercial Roofing and Waterproofing. Joe graduated from Florida International University with a degree in finance. He worked in securities trading until 2009, then started his own online advertising business. In 2015, he started his own construction business, JIC Construction. And then in 2016, he also started Sterling Pacific Commercial Roofing and Waterproofing, which installs, maintains, and repairs roofing and waterproofing systems in Oregon and Washington. Joe, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your businesses?
Sure. The main focus that I work on is Sterling Pacific. So we are a commercial roofing company, and we are 8.5 years, almost 9 years in business. And I don't, like you mentioned, I don't have a prior background in construction. So this was my first go in construction, and we are a COVID certified firm. And that's everything else you hit. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. I have more to talk about on COVID in a little bit after Carrie's wonderful presentation. But first, we want to talk about how construction industry organizations, so whether it's a general contractor, subcontractor, design professionals, how can they promote diversity within their workforce and leadership positions? And George, leading up to this, you provided some great points about leadership development and leadership training. Can you expand on that a little bit for everyone?
Sure. In the construction industry, Like I said previously, about 47% is the labor force, are Latinos. But when we look at management services, we only represent about 14% nationwide. And so there are some barriers that need to be addressed when we think about linguistic barriers. Also things that I think that private organizations can do as far as being a general contractor or subcontractor is actually being able to put a thoughtful process into what is your policy on training and developing your staff, the future of your company. And what we know right now is that the Latino community in the United States, represents a very young population. And this is a population that is ready to take that mantle and move it forward. And so what is your leadership strategy? How are you actually getting to the point where you are providing not just the services of what you're trying to build, but actually promoting within your organization that you are also looking at your recruitment practices? Are you actually going out to universities and talking with Latino students that are in engineering, that are in architecture, all of these different areas that we have very low representation? There is a population out there that is ready to serve, but you have to ask yourself, what have we created in order to create that engine of leadership within our own organization?
And part of that has to do with succession planning for organizations. Is that right?
That's right. We're not going to be around here forever, right? I soon hope to retire, hopefully within 20 years, right? And I think some of us don't want to be doing what we're doing for the rest of our lives. But we have to think about succession planning. Who are we actually bringing up and mentoring in our programs? And do our programs actually work and support the people that are actually trying to train the next generation? If we are running an organization as a gatekeeper organization, then yes, you will never be replaced, but you will also never be able to succeed past your own barriers. So my biggest piece of advice is really look within your organization and figure out what are you putting in place in order to have a good succession. So that way, when you leave, the initiative continues to push forward.
And you also mentioned collaboration with other stakeholders, industry collaborations, community and supplier diversity. Can you expand on that?
Sure. In this work of construction, it takes a lot of people in order to build any sort of infrastructure. And it's the same thing when we think about worker development. You don't have to do it yourself. There are other entities out there. There are colleges that are willing to help you develop a program that is going to help you be successful. There's also trade organizations like the trade organization that I represent that are out there that are willing to be there side by side to help you, especially when we think about minority communities. There is a cultural gap and an understanding of actually how to connect to that community that you currently employ. And sometimes the best way to be able to get through them is to work with specific cultural organizations to be able to provide that gap for you. And what you'll see is you'll see growth and prosperity, and you will see that your employees are very vested in you because of how much you've embraced their community and their culture.
Thanks, George. Joe, can you tell us a little bit how Sterling Pacific has promoted diversity in its leadership?
Yeah, I think so. Sterling Pacific is a small company. And when I was first thinking about promoting leadership or just any type of growth as a small company, you think about having to go out into the marketplace to find individuals. And, it doesn't matter who you are, the workforce, whether it's in the office or out in the field, it's scarce. It's hard to find individuals. So what I had hoped would be a journey that would allow us to, just find people out in the marketplace to do the work and fit the positions that we're looking for. It wasn't something that was feasible, not in today's world. So I think like George was saying, it's basically we're looking at promotion from within. And I think as a small roofing contractor, when I look at the larger roofing contractors and just historically, it feels like people will work out in the field and then certain folks will show that they or have a desire to then work in the office. And so I think for our focus, it's trying to find a good workforce. What we've done is join the Northwest College of Construction. So we're a certified training agent within the state, and that offers some structure for our field and our employees. And then it's a matter of how do you grow that workforce and then bring those people up into leadership positions. Some of the things that we've done, we've brought a Spanish-speaking individual into our office, and that helps communicate with the crews in the office so that it helps. I mean, there can be a disjoint or, an issue with language and things like that. So to have somebody that's in the office, understands what's going on with the company and communicate that directly to the field, it's helped tremendously. That's something that we did just 2 years ago. And it's made a world of difference. We also participate when we can in pre-apprenticeship programs like Constructing Hope, which is in Northeast Portland, and it helps us bring more people to the table to work out in the field. Anything where we can participate in something that's offering training or mentorship to our workers is something that we try and participate in. And one of the goals that I've had, and I want to start working on this next year and the following years, is to work with organizations like George's, the National Hispanic Construction Alliance, Latino Build, and do some type of collaboration where we can do onboarding with those type of entities, just to bring more people into the fold with companies that utilize things like workforce training. And the other thing that we're looking at doing is bringing on more internships. So starting folks in the office. My kids went to De La Salle North Catholic High School, and they had an internship program, and I'm familiar with a couple of people in our industry in local GCs that have brought kids in under that internship program and then stayed on with the company after college. They've come back and worked for those companies. So things like that to get people young. One of the stats I looked up, and I see it every day out in the field, the average age of a roofer is 37 years old. So we want to try and get people while they're young, get them excited about the work, and just start that journey and look at it as a career, not just a job.
Fascinating. I would not have guessed that average age. That's interesting. Well, before we turn to Nick to see things from the county side, we do want to talk about the initiatives in the public and private sector that are aimed at breaking down barriers and promoting diversity within the construction industry. And George, you're the CEO of one of these initiatives, and you've also mentioned the Home Builders Association and Women's Construction Coalition. Can you expand on the importance of those initiatives and kind of what the goal is for them?
These initiatives are very important because we come from a lens of understanding our community that we're trying to serve. And we want the general contractors, we want the developers, we want cities and families to be successful. But we know that there are barriers in front of us in order to be able to do the things that we need to do. And so just like many trade organizations, we just don't put on events. We provide a level of education that is currently not accessible to them in the way that they need to learn it. And so that is a huge focus. I think for many trade organizations, what we lack in sometimes is the availability of funding, commitments from government agencies and also from the private entity. I tell many people that join my organization, I'm not asking you to join because I just want you to pay your dues. I want you to join because you are invested into this initiative and that you're investing into the membership. And so it's not always about just cutting a check. It is about actually providing the resources and the accessibility of those resources to the community that it can be shared. And so that way we can gain in that wealth and that knowledge also.
Thanks, George. So Nick, your turn, finally. Let's talk about the ways in which Multnomah County has incorporated diversity and justice considerations in their decision-making process, their project planning, and their community engagement. So you provided some materials on Mulco's purchasing processes. Can you explain those?
Yeah, sure. There's some materials in there that I provided that, and if any of you have had clients that have bid on public projects, you've probably seen them. And those explain some of the COVID certification and then two of the main programs that Multnomah County has, which have to be complied with to do any projects within the county. The first is the good faith effort, which is I've heard it described as merely a paperwork requirement, and I guess that's true. But what the GFE requires is that for any projects over $150,000, and that number is likely to jump by at least 50,000 in the next cycle. But right now, for any project over $150,000, contractors are required to do outreach to 5 COVID certified firms for every trade that works on the project. That outreach has to be providing a copy of the bid documents and advising them that, asking these companies to do bids. I can tell you that this has had a lot of success in actually getting COVID certified firms to be more aware of the public works projects that are out there. And many of these companies have told us that they would not have bid on these projects and would not have been involved in them if it weren't for this outreach. There's a penalty there's LDs if this is not done. And there's some other requirements, and I think they're described in the documents fairly clearly. If you have any questions, I'm happy to go over them either now or later, by the way. I'm happy to field calls when I'm just in the office. The second one is the workforce training and hiring, which requires, and this is the numbers right now, are for any project over $200,000 for prime, and it applies for any sub that's doing work for over $100,000. And what it requires is 20% apprenticeship participation from COVID certified firms. There's an LD of $250 a day for any day that you don't have those numbers that are actually being met. There is an exemption but it has to be filed in advance. And we've had tremendous success in most projects do not have LDs assessed for either one of these. And so that's, I think, a real success. So those are two of the programs that in our legal world we're most likely to see. The other two I do want to highlight. One is the Construction Diversity and Equity Fund, which is a Multnomah County policy, and the county sets aside 1% of the budget for every project that we do over $1 million towards the CDF. So the new courthouse that we just built, $3.2 million went to the CDF. And these funds are set aside for COVID firms. I think you asked earlier, like what's done to help these firms. This money is set aside. Oh, and any LDs that we do assess get added to this as well. So your money isn't just going into our coffers, I guess. Goes towards helping COVID certified firms with almost anything they need to get help with. The county has a set of on-call service providers, which are available, and to provide accounting work, bookkeeping, any kind of IT, marketing, website development for these COVID firms. It's very broad. If you have clients who are in the field, make sure they know about this. We have mostly used all the money we've gotten, but there have been times when there's been money left over. It doesn't go away, but it would be nice to actually have it regularly all being used. And again, we've had really good feedback on the fact that a lot of these firms, which are smaller often and developing, have access to this money for growth in the future. And the last one I'll just point out is Central Purchasing has a budget to support NAMAC and a number of other organizations that are doing work in this field. We're trying to get more, not only COVID certified, but just generally minority women-owned companies involved. And I'll point out that the Oregon Native American Chamber is doing a lot of work to try to get more Native American people involved in the construction trade. They've got an event on the 19th of this month, and we're sponsoring that. And there's a number of really great organizations out there. So,
What's the name of that event so we can plug it?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I put you on the spot.
it's the Native American Chamber Construction event, and I don't have it. I say it again. That's right. Yeah, thank you.
Gathering?
It's on the 19th, and oh, okay, great.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Well, Nick, I don't want to cut you short,
That's it.
but you mentioned COVID a bunch, and that's something we just talked with Carrie about.
Yeah.
And Joe, you were interviewed in an article, and you said that your advice to other small businesses was to visit the COVID website. So I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit how COVID helped you grow your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not certified, then you're not going to get looks at certain projects where that certification is required. So I think the system does work in the sense that if the contractor is ready to do the work and perform the work, that certification can get them on the job. I mean, I think one of the key things is once you get on that job, you got to be ready to perform. But as I understand it, I get calls from general contractors that will tell me, hey, we have a certain percentage that we need to meet for the entire project. And that percentage is going to go to a COVID certified firm. So as the cert gets you in front of those phone calls and you're ready to do that work, then it's just important to have for your business. And I think it does work. I think when I first got into this, again, being not in construction previously, I didn't know all the players. Once I did get into the field, I could see that there were certain smaller minority-owned businesses that, came from different cultural backgrounds than what you kind of consider the norm. So, the idea or concept that you're going to get a seat at the table by doing, traditional methods of relationship building might not be there for certain entities. And this is a way for companies that maybe couldn't get there through traditional routes to get there. And I've been on job sites where I've heard, the GC or the guys running the job say, oh, I would have never heard of this contractor, but they took advantage of this opportunity and they're great. We'll use them again. So I think overall, it's a successful way to get companies that wouldn't otherwise be at these projects on the project.
That's great. And Carrie kind of walked us through in the last presentation, the certification process. I'm just curious, what was your experience like as one of the certifying entities going through that COVID process?
It can be looked at as cumbersome, and I would recommend that anybody that would be interested in getting the certification take advantage of any type of technical support. And I'm sure the county and other GCs or anybody out there would help a contractor get through it, because it is lengthy and there'll be things that might be a hard stop for somebody filling out the application. And then you just find out if you do the next set of questions, well, you could just put, I don't have that, and move on. And I think some people look at that and say, oh, that's way too much information, or I don't know where to find all this stuff. So it's really key that the contractor be an advocate for themselves and promote themselves and figure out the answers to that, because while it does seem cumbersome and a lot of material that you have to provide, you actually can get through it pretty easily. So I do remember when they had asked me to somehow prove that I was a minority, they wanted a picture of my driver's license. I don't know if I had that at the time. So I just took a picture of my hand and sent it in on that questionnaire and uploaded it as PDF. And then years later, I went back and the lady was looking for my renewal and she was looking at my paperwork. She's like, oh, you're the guy that sent in a picture of your hand for for that particular question. So, there's ways to get through it.
Great. It's fascinating. George, when we're talking about the ways that organizations can implement diversity, you brought up in the project planning aspect, accessible design. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and when we talk about like accessible design and that process is who's a part of the creation of the project? Who is it that you're trying to serve? What input are you getting from your community? What input are you getting from your employees? When we think about like the ingenuity of your employees, especially for the Latino community, a lot of people say, George, I don't necessarily know how to bring up these subjects. How is it that we can get them to the table? And my answer to them is, look at developing employee resource groups, really leaning on your employees, but allowing them that space in order to be able to create some of the solutions for you instead of you guiding them. Let them guide that process. The more that you empower them, the more success that you're going to be able to see. Because for many of us, as we climb the corporate ladder, we get more and more disconnected with what's happening on the ground level. And I think what's disheartening for me to see when we think about project design is that as we're going up the ladder for the Latino community, we're not kind of climbing up that ladder also. And so you're not hearing from some very important voices in that process because there's very few of us that actually climb up to those levels.
And you also mentioned community engagement and community benefit agreements. Can you explain what that is and how it's important?
Sure. You know, with community engagement, a lot of people struggle with this piece of understanding how do we actually connect with the community that we're actually trying to serve. And I will say that that's a huge barrier because it's not just one way. It's not that just institutions struggle to engage the Latino community, but it also goes the other way too. Latinos also struggle how to engage others, whether it's government agencies or big organizations. And understand that for some of us, the status of whether we're undocumented really does put us in the shadows of our community. And then for many of us that, you know, are legally here, the problem is that we don't want to stand up because of the culture that we have been grown up to live and breathe, which is just put your head down, work hard, don't say anything. And so when you get that, well, there's no communication going either way. And so you really have to sort of break out of your comfort zone. You have to think about how is it that you're actually advertising to the community. And what a lot of people don't understand is, you know, here in the United States, the Latino community, when it comes to the GDP, we are purchasers of goods. You know, if you just take the Latino community and put us aside, we'd be the 4th largest country. And I'm just talking about the Latinos that are living here in the United States. That's how much we contribute to the economy. But yet, not too many people actually reach out into our community, advertise within our community, provide opportunities into our community. And so I really, what I would encourage is that not just working with trade organization and other nonprofit organizations, but really look at your dollars and what you're investing in and seeing how is it that we are reaching out to them? Are we creating material, material in Spanish? Are we advertising, whether it's on TV or radio? How are we working with our local education institutions to actually be modeling the future of this industry? These are all things that you have to ask yourself within in order not just to reach the Latino community, but any other community. The more you live and breathe within that community, the more that you are part of it, and the more that we will embrace you as minorities. And that's how we create unity and collaboration within that community.
Thanks. That was very insightful. You know, next we want to talk about examples of construction projects that actively integrated inclusivity and accessibility. George, I know that you had mentioned the Plaza Los Amigos project, and I'll give you an opportunity to talk about that. And then Nick and Joe, if you guys want to jump in and provide examples of your own, it'd be great.
Yeah, so that one was a really good project because I think like from the developer standpoint, for that one, they definitely wanted to see participation from the Latino community. And they put a lot of pressure on their general contractor to develop those relationships. And the general contractor did a really good job of working with other trade organizations and within the community to make sure that this project was going to be built by the community. And the community itself has a lot of, how can I put this? They have a lot of pride in what they built. They're going to see that building for generations to come. It opened the eyes to so many other young adults that say, you know what, I want to also participate in that. I want to build the next project. They see also too, is that understand because we keep our head down and just continue to work hard, that they saw an opportunity to gain wealth in that project themselves. It opened the door for new business owners to say, yes, I want to open a business. I'm a minority. I believe I can do this. There is opportunity out there. So that initiative really not just created a structure, but it created a gateway for the future generation to get involved. It created opportunity for new business owners. It created now a stepping stone towards generational wealth instead of continuing down the path of generational poverty. That is the power of one job that is built by the community.
Thanks, George. Joe, Nick, did you have?
Well, one of the things I picked up on in what George said was it was the developer that wanted to promote the the use and the diversity and I think that's key. It has to come from the owner and the projects that I've been involved in when the owner is on board with promoting diversity, bringing on COVID firms, and they're working in concert with a bigger GC that also has that in their fabric, their institution, then I think that's a combination that can really help small contractors, because you could have the owner be on board and if the GC isn't, if we can get to the project, that's just part of the game. You actually have to then perform when you're on the project. And that's a whole different set of issues that can come up with just who's on the project, who's the management of the project. We had a case where we met Skanska at Best HQ, actually. So they were doing an outreach event there. And I met the project manager for a job. Beaverton, I believe it was the city of Beaverton, was really on board with making this happen for getting COVID firms onto that job. And Skanska was able to support a smaller contractor to make sure that they had success. So, it's a whole thing that goes into this to make sure that it's a win-win at the end of the day. It sounds like it was on your project, but you really have to have all the players that are involved be on board with the success and of the contractor and the mission, the overall mission to get participation. And then I think it does exactly what you said, which is it affects generations to come and people can be on a job site, they get inspired to make it a career. I mean, it's just the magic happens once you have that sort of mix. And I've seen it with the county and other entities when they get involved and they have a large GC that can also be on the same page.
That's great. Nick, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I because I think kudos are important. I wanted to point out just a couple there are many construction companies in the area that are doing great work along these lines. I want to point out two in particular. One is Anderson Construction. I believe they just won the Business Diversity Institute's national award for their efforts with diversity. I know that from working with them, and they're the CMGC on a couple of our library bond projects right now. They really do targeted outreach when they're doing their bidding, and they don't just put an ad in the paper. They really have they have their finger in all the different organizations, and they really actively work to make sure that inclusion is a big part of their business. Also, I want to point out Fortis Construction, whose attorney may be here and didn't want me to name him, but they're working on our $37 million operations center right now. They have achieved right now their COVID participation rate is 35%. That is a huge number in any market. And that's 16% women, 19% minority owned businesses. And they always have their own internal goal of 30%, which is again, a really big number. They're obviously very invested in this. So I just want to point out give kudos where it's due to some of our companies, which really do focus on these issues.
Absolutely. And one running theme throughout today is the collaboration between advocacy groups, nonprofits, and then also contractors, owners. We have a pretty well-rounded panel here with someone from each corner of the industry. And so I just wanted to ask you, how have organizations in the construction industry, and in particular your organizations, how have they partnered with advocacy groups to advance diversity, inclusion, and social justice? And I'll start with you, Joe, because you had previously talked about your relationship between your business and NAMAC Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I probably wouldn't be sitting here today without NAMAC. They have been instrumental in my journey into getting into public work. And it's very complex when you're trying to grow a business, you're wearing many hats, and I don't think it's possible to do without entities like NAMAC and the services that they provide. I mean, when I first got into the business and got COVID certified, NAMAC's office was actually like 2 blocks from my house. And I remember they would bring construction entities into their office and they'd open up a set of plans. Again, I'm coming from finance, and now I'm looking at a set of plans. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of work that I'm gonna have to do to get ready for this. And they helped all along the way. There's so many pitfalls in construction, as you guys all know, of course, being attorneys, but contracts, dealing with things on the job like change orders, doing those things correctly. When I first engaged with Nate and his team, I know he said, oh, we'll do a write-up for you in the DJC and our little supplemental thing. So he's helped with marketing. And I can't say enough about NAMAC and other organizations like it for a small business. You absolutely need to have that technical support and the relationships and the outreach that they have. You can just jump on that and ride the wave with them. So again, NAMAC and that entity is I think why I'm still here and still working and still enjoying what I do.
That's great. And that echoes what we heard earlier from Alex and Molly Washington about NAMAC's role. And Nick, did you have anything to add on this topic?
I would just say that several years ago, we started a new position in the county, and that's our supplier diversity director. Her name is Maggie Chavez. She's fantastic. If there's ever any questions about any of our programs, that should be her call. I can give you her number off if you want afterwards. But and having an office dedicated to these issues, who works with all of the different groups in the region and who works with the contractors, has freed up our trying to teach the relevant issues to all of the different project managers and so forth. So I think that's been a significant benefit to us.
And George, there's one topic that you had mentioned that I see sometimes pretty regularly that I think deserves some discussion, and that's tokenization and superficial engagement. Can you explain what those terms are and what the concerns are there?
That comes from both the private and government side of things. Is when we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, we tokenize a position. We put a person of color in a position, but they really have no authority to do anything, or just sort of this face of the organization. I think that does a real disservice to the initiative of actually creating, diversity and being a part of the DEI community. When I think of what has happened in this country from the time of COVID till now, we have opened our eyes to some of the inequities in our society, but we cannot cover that up by just putting a person of color in front of it and saying that now we've changed. I think that there has to be the appropriate policy changes and also the appropriate implementation strategy of how do we actually create an inclusive environment. And if you have a person that you're calling your diversity and equity manager, then they should be put in a position of power and authority that they actually can make those changes. But if they're not, and they're just a figurehead, then you're really doing a disservice to what's currently happening. But there's also other organizations that do a great job, like Anderson Construction, like what you said. I work with them very closely. They definitely do some things outside of the box from what you traditionally see. They really do lean into understanding their blind spots, and that ability to be vulnerable with themselves has helped them propel and move their company in the right direction. And that's why I think that they continue to receive awards, because they don't tokenize the position. They're actually evolving their company to understand the impacts and how difficult it really is to be a person of color in this country.
And so as we sit here today, I had another question that came up is, for those of us in the audience, we're typically construction attorneys or some kind of legal professional in the construction industry. And I'm really interested to hear from both the panel and then from anyone in the audience that wants to chip in. What role can construction attorneys play in promoting diversity and justice within the industry? I mean, at the end of the day, we're not necessarily one of the stakeholders on a certain project, but we are involved. Is there any role that we can play in this?
I think so. So when I first got into the business, I was, Portland's a great community. There's no doubt about it, as far as support and promotion of COVID firms. And there's, like NAMAC, for example, they have a general meeting where people come and they talk about, projects and mentor protege specifically is a great model where a company like Fortis or Anderson would then mentor a smaller company. And I was loving it. It was great. Sterling Pacific did get into some legal issues at one point. And I remember when I went to talk to one of the attorneys about the situation that I was in, And I described it to him, he kind of eye rolled and said, oh, another one of those, you know? And like, it happens all the time. And I just thought to myself, my goodness, this happens all the time. And I've come this far into my journey. I've never even heard about it, but yet you guys see this all the time. And I mean, knowledge is power, especially if you have somebody that is a decision maker and has decided to take the step to do something entrepreneurial. That in itself is difficult to get out of our, current society. But when I heard him, say what he said and do the eye roll, I thought, gosh, I sure wish I would have known that these are pitfalls of companies like mine. And that, I mean, until I got into it, I didn't even know it existed, right? So I think, some sort of platform or participation to highlight things that are happening. And I don't know how that goes because there's names associated with different issues and stuff, but if there is a way to let, especially the smaller contractor that's just starting out, and even more, especially a COVID contractor, like, hey, these are the things that you need to look out for. Because again, you're wearing multiple hats. You're just trying to secure jobs so that you can get, enough work to then hire people, which is another facet of the business, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get out on the job and what really happens and what really could happen to your business from a risk side that could land you in some sort of situation where you need the services of somebody in the legal community. And, without knowing those things, it's hard to anticipate or plan for them. So I don't know how it could be done, but I just remember thinking, gosh, I wish I would have known about this prior.
I have a long list for all of you. I want you to think of yourselves as the rebar in a foundation. You don't see yourselves as stakeholders. I'm telling you, you are. But what I want you to understand, this is not necessarily directed towards minority groups. This is small business owners. It is hard to be a small business owner. We don't know what we don't know until something happens. And where do we go to lean on? We lean on attorneys to help us through these problems. There's several things that you can do. The industry, to be an attorney, it's expensive. For many small business owners, we can't afford legal representation. What happens to us when something goes wrong on a big project, we can't even defend ourselves. And we just let it go. And for many of us, that puts us underwater and we're no longer in business. Affordability. That is what I'm getting at. Affordability. Also, volunteering your time with trade organizations to be able to provide classes for these entrepreneurs that just don't know what they don't know yet. That's another resource that you can be doing. I would love to see a team of attorneys to actually tackle on our legislative issues that we currently have right now at the state and local level. That way we can actually start building and actually have a process that's more streamlined. But who can afford that? There are things that I think that attorneys can definitely help with that will provide success and support for the construction industry, especially for that small business. I'm not too worried about Anderson Construction. They probably have a team of lawyers on staff, but for the small startup construction owner, guess what? He does it all. I can almost guarantee you that Joe does it all. And where is he going to find the funding and the accessibility to that funding when right now in this country, access to capital is huge. Interest rates are on the rise. Who can even afford it? Understand that that is a huge barrier, and you are the rebar that can actually hold us together and push us forward.
Yeah, and I would just say, I would add on, I was thinking about this since this event was coming up, but if there was something like a St. Andrew's Legal Clinic only for contractors, and I don't know if there is. So, but that model where you can go in and get, some sort of access at an affordable rate would be huge in this community. Because I have seen good, genuine people that may not understand the cultural situation or the language was off, but they made that step, that entrepreneurial step, which is huge, to go out on your own and you eat what you kill. You don't get a paycheck, and they have come in like shining stars, because there is a vacuum here in this town when somebody comes and shows promise. And I've seen guys go down that road and then go out of business for various reasons, and it's disheartening. So a lot of that is is access and understanding the legal framework. Because if you're coming in just doing rebar and you think, hey, I can do this, I'm gonna make a go at it as a business, you may not know all the legal stuff and contracts, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is a huge piece of it.
So I know that our time is almost up, but I'm hearing a need, and I want to just harken back to what Alex said earlier about pro bono and reduced fee legal services for for-profit and small businesses. And just maybe that's a call to action to all of us in the room so that we can do our part to promote diversity and justice in the construction industry. I know that we're up for time, but if there's any questions, I want to give you an opportunity to ask our fantastic panel.
Thanks. It's not really a question. I just want to connect a couple of dots because one of the things that keeps coming up is the efficacy of COVID, how much it matters. And I'm House Counsel for Florida, so to speak, shouting out. And I just want to touch on things. We have an extremely difficult pre-qualification process for our subs. And with COVID, we realized that we can't wait until we bid on a project to then go out and find subs. And so we have institutionalized a program in the company where we, as Joe said, we mentor COVID subs throughout the year. Each business division is required to identify COVID subs that they work with their finances to get them into a position so that we can all succeed on these projects. So it's not even a matter even more of us trying to qualify for projects. Is we know this is all built into the model now. And for those of you who represent other GCs, as much as I hate to give any edge that we have, I would highly recommend that you counsel your clients to develop similar mentorship programs because it has been wonderful for us and it has enabled us to be very successful.
Can I just quickly throw in, Ryan? Passing information along to your clients, even some of this, like if you have a COVID client who needs help with bookkeeping, like passing them along that there is assistance available is incredibly valuable. And I'll just throw this in. We did recently, we're doing a program with Port of Portland. It's a mentorship program for COVID firms and where they work with larger contractors. And we've got three mentee programs who we're working with right now. One of those didn't know of this program at all and applied and got the program expressly because their attorney was aware of it and told all of his clients, hey, do you know there's this mentorship program for small emerging minority-owned companies? And they got it, they won up, and they're going to be a success. They're going to be a huge success. Everybody already knows that. So passing information along is the easiest way that we have to help those clients.
It's fantastic. Come to you.
I just wanted to say for what Joe and George are talking about as far as affordability and resources and stuff like that, a plug for my alma mater and Nick's alma mater, Lewis and Clark Law School has a small business legal clinic that they do support for small businesses and stuff like that. And I know it's taking away work from maybe some of the other attorneys in the office or in this room, but that's an opportunity. There's always different things for people like that.
Thanks. All right, if that's the last of the questions, just give a hand to our wonderful panel. Thank you so much, Nick, George, and Joe.